Welcome to my channel. Subscribe to the channel and listen to my stories every day. The crisp autumn air filtered in through the kitchen window, the faint sounds of distant traffic mixing with the gentle clinking of glasses as my wife, Lucy, busied herself with dinner. It had been a long week for both of us, work piling up as usual, and yet, something felt different. Maybe it was the way she moved, a certain guardedness in her gestures, or the way she glanced at her phone every few minutes, as if waiting for something, or someone. She'd been more secretive lately, which wasn't like her. We'd always shared everything, passwords, calendars, even small, meaningless details of our day. I had no reason to distrust her, yet that uneasy feeling gnawed at me. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just the stress of work or the recent tension we'd been having over finances. But it was hard to shake the creeping suspicion that had settled into my chest. That evening, as we sat down to eat, I tried to push the thought aside. "What's on your mind?" I asked, trying to keep the tone light. I had noticed that she had been distracted throughout the day, her smile strained. Lucy shrugged, poking at her food with little interest. "Just work, you know. It's been really hectic. Anything I can help with?" She gave me a quick smile but didn't meet my eyes. "No, it's fine. Just some client stuff." For a moment, I let it go. I wanted to believe her. After all, we had been married for almost 10 years, built a life together. Why would she lie? But as the dinner conversation drifted into silence, I caught her phone buzzing on the table, screen lighting up with a message. She glanced at it quickly before flipping it face down, the tension in her shoulders growing noticeable. That was when I knew. Something wasn't right. I didn't press her on it, though. Not then. I wasn't ready for what I might uncover. Instead, I nodded, made small talk, and we finished dinner in an uncomfortable silence. She had plans to go out later, girls' night, she called it, and that was that. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that I was being paranoid. Later that evening, as she was getting ready to leave, Lucy moved around the bedroom with practiced calm, applying her makeup with precision and fixing her hair. I watched her from the bed, not really paying attention to the television in front of me, my eyes following her every movement. She had put in more effort than usual, tight jeans, a fitted blouse that clung to her figure, and heels she rarely wore anymore. "You look nice," I said, hoping for some sort of explanation. She paused, giving me a fleeting smile through the mirror's reflection. "Thanks. It's just a casual thing with the girls. I'll be back late, don't wait up." I nodded, trying to hide the growing unease inside me. She picked up her purse, slinging it over her shoulder. Her phone buzzed again, and she glanced down at it quickly, her expression unreadable. I watched her head for the door, my stomach twisting in knots. "See you tomorrow," she called as she left, the sound of the door closing behind her echoing in the quiet house. I sat there, staring at the space where she had been just moments before, my mind racing. The urge to follow her, to see where she was really going, gnawed at me. But I hesitated, conflicted between trusting her and acknowledging the pit of dread growing inside me. Could I really be that guy? The suspicious, untrusting husband? No, that wasn't who I was. We had always been open, honest. This was probably just a bad case of overthinking. But then, the phone buzzed again. She had left it on the kitchen counter in her rush, and without thinking, I walked over, my hands trembling slightly as I picked it up. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. A message from someone named Nick. "I can't wait to spend the whole weekend with you, babe." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood there, frozen, the phone still in my hand, my mind struggling to process what I had just seen. Weekend? Babe? My hands shook as I scrolled up through the conversation, but it was clear. This wasn't some friendly banter between coworkers. This was intimate. Familiar. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I was suffocating, drowning in the reality that I had been too blind to see until now. Lucy had been cheating on me. The woman I loved, the woman I had built a life with, had been sleeping with someone else. And not just anyone, Nick, whoever the hell that was. I sank into one of the kitchen chairs, the phone still clutched in my hand. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribcage, the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. How long had this been going on? How had I been so clueless? My mind raced through every interaction we'd had in the last few months, every time she'd brushed me off, every late night she'd spent at work or with friends. It all made sense now, and it made me sick. I wanted to call her right then, demand answers, confront her. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the sudden clarity, the realization that confronting her wouldn't change anything. Not right now. She was out with him, not the girls. That much was obvious. Confronting her wouldn't stop the betrayal. If anything, it would give her a chance to lie her way out of it. No, I needed to think. I needed to plan. I set the phone down and walked to the window, staring out into the dark street. Lucy had done a number on me, but I wasn't going to let her win that easily. If she thought she could cheat on me and walk away without consequences, she had another thing coming. I spent the rest of the night pacing, trying to figure out what to do next. I needed proof, something concrete. The message was damning, sure, but I needed more. I needed to know the full extent of her betrayal. And then I would strike. When I was ready, when I had everything lined up, I would make her pay for what she'd done to me. For now, I just had to wait. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house. Lucy hadn't come home yet, and I didn't expect her to. The silence of our home felt different now, heavier, oppressive. It was no longer a place of comfort but a reminder of betrayal. Every picture frame, every piece of furniture, even the scent of her perfume lingering in the air, it all felt tainted. I sat at the kitchen table, the memory of the night before playing on repeat in my mind. I should have felt something, a deeper sadness or a bitter rage, but instead, I felt numb. The shock hadn't worn off yet. I kept staring at her phone, which I had placed back on the counter. The message from Nick was still fresh in my mind. I can't wait to spend the whole weekend with you, babe. She wasn't just having an affair. She was building a life with this man, carving out weekends for him, lying to my face with practiced ease. But instead of storming off or calling her in a fit of anger, I knew I had to be smarter than that. My mind raced through the steps I needed to take. It wasn't just about catching her anymore, it was about how to handle this whole mess in a way that left me standing tall at the end of it. I wasn't going to just be another heartbroken fool. I grabbed her phone and scrolled through her recent messages. It didn't take long to find more of Nick's texts. They'd been exchanging messages for months, planning meetings, sneaking around, sending photos. I read each one with a growing knot of nausea in my stomach, the words seeping in like poison. They had been intimate far longer than I'd thought. Lucy had been living a double life right under my nose, smiling at me during the day, slipping into Nick's bed at night. I put her phone back down, feeling the surge of anger starting to return. I needed to calm myself. Blowing up at her wasn't going to solve anything. If I wanted to make her pay, I needed a plan. A real plan. The first step was getting more proof. If this was going to end, I wanted it to end on my terms. That meant no messy fights, no screaming matches. I wanted to strip away everything from her. If she thought she could build a new life with Nick, I would make sure she had nothing left to stand on. I had a friend, Jake, who worked in IT security. We had known each other since high school, and though we hadn't kept in touch regularly, I knew he'd help if I asked. I dialed his number, still unsure of how much I wanted to reveal. "Hey, man, long time no talk," Jake said when he answered. "Yeah, it's been a while," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Listen, I need a favor. It's personal." I need to track someone's movements, phone records, texts, maybe even their location. Can you help me with that? There was a brief pause. This sounds serious, Mark. You okay? I didn't want to get into the details over the phone. Yeah, I'm fine. I just need to know if you can do it. He hesitated, but then he gave in. All right. I can help you, but you need to be sure about this. Once we go down this road, it's not easy to undo. I'm sure. My voice was cold. This wasn't a decision I'd made lightly. Okay, I'll need her phone for a bit. I can install something to track everything, calls, texts, even her GPS location. You'll get all the data on your phone. Can you drop it by later today? Yeah, I can do that. I hung up, feeling a strange sense of relief. This was step one. Soon, I'd have everything I needed. Later that morning, Lucy finally came home. She walked in like everything was normal, a light smile on her face, pretending as though she hadn't just spent the night in another man's bed. I watched her as she put down her purse and pulled off her shoes, humming softly to herself. She didn't even try to cover her tracks anymore. Hey, she said, walking into the kitchen. Sorry, I stayed out later than I thought. How was your night? I forced a smile. Fine. Just caught up on some work. She nodded, still not meeting my eyes. She was good at this, acting normal, as if nothing was wrong. But I wasn't the same clueless husband I had been yesterday. Not anymore. The mask she wore, the lies she spun, I saw through it all now. I'm going to head to the gym for a bit, I said, getting up from the kitchen table. I'll be back in a few hours. Lucy barely reacted, just nodded. Okay, have a good workout. I grabbed her phone from the counter and slipped it into my pocket as I headed for the door. She didn't even notice. She was too wrapped up in her own deception, too confident that I wouldn't suspect a thing. But soon, she'd find out how wrong she was. On my way to Jake's, I felt the weight of what I was about to do. But there was no turning back now. I arrived at Jake's place, a small apartment just outside the city, and knocked on the door. He opened it, giving me a concerned look. You look like hell, man, he said. I shrugged. It's been a rough couple of days. He led me inside, and I handed over Lucy's phone. You sure about this? He asked again. I need to know everything, Jake. Every detail. He nodded and got to work. It didn't take long, he connected the phone to his laptop, typing away while I sat on the couch, my leg bouncing nervously. After about 15 minutes, he looked up. All right, it's done, Jake said, handing the phone back to me. You'll get all her messages, calls, and GPS locations in real time. You'll have access to everything. But Mark, once you go through with this, there's no unseeing what you find. I'm ready. I thanked him and left, feeling the cold air hit my face as I stepped back outside. I had Lucy's phone in my pocket, her secret life now laid bare before me. I returned home a few hours later, just as Lucy was sitting down to watch TV. I casually dropped her phone on the kitchen counter, the same place she had left it earlier. She didn't even notice. For the next few days, I monitored everything. Every message, every call, every location she went to, it was all right there on my phone. And what I saw confirmed everything I had feared. She wasn't just meeting Nick for the occasional hookup. She was lying to me about entire weekends, sneaking away to be with him in hotels and at his place. The messages between them were sickening. Nick was already talking about a future with her, asking when she was going to leave me. And Lucy? She was playing along, telling him she was working on it, that she just needed more time. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I held back. I needed more than just their texts. I needed proof that I could use to end this marriage on my terms. Then, on the following Friday, Lucy told me she was going on another girls' weekend. I could barely contain my anger as I watched her pack her bags. She kissed me on the cheek before she left, her lies as smooth as ever. I waited until she was gone, then followed her. This time, I was ready. I knew exactly where she was going. And when I saw her meet up with Nick at a hotel on the other side of town, it was like the last piece of the puzzle falling into place. I had the proof. I had everything. Now, it was time to act. By the time Lucy returned from her weekend, everything was set. I had spent the last few days preparing, making sure every piece of evidence I had collected was secure. Emails, text messages, GPS logs, photos, I had it all. I had watched her waltz through her deception with Nick, crafting lies with such ease, and now, I held the key to dismantling her carefully built facade. Lucy walked through the door on Sunday evening, her face glowing with the usual post-weekend relaxation she now routinely carried home with her. She tossed her keys on the table and gave me a quick smile, the same hollow expression she always used to mask her guilt. I stayed calm, playing along like I had for weeks, but inside, I was simmering. "How was your weekend?" she asked, moving towards the kitchen to pour herself a glass of wine. "Quiet," I replied. "How about yours? Girls have a good time?" She didn't hesitate. "Oh yeah, just some relaxing and catching up. You know how it is." I nodded, fighting the urge to call her out right there. But I knew I had to wait. The timing had to be perfect. That night, I kept my distance, watching her as she moved through the house, pretending everything was normal. I wondered how many times she had done this, come home to me after being with him, lying straight to my face. I had to bite down the bile rising in my throat. But I wasn't going to explode. No, I had something better in mind. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I had already met with him once, explaining the situation in vague terms. Now, I laid it all out, told him everything, and gave him the evidence I'd collected. He looked through the files, nodding occasionally, his face grim but approving. "You've got more than enough here, Mark," he said, closing the folder. "This will be an easy divorce for you. With the evidence of her affair, we can ensure that you get the house, the assets, and, if there were kids involved, primary custody. She won't have a leg to stand on." "Good," I said, my voice cold. "I want everything locked down. No room for her to fight this." He smiled. "Don't worry. We'll make sure she's left with nothing." That was exactly what I wanted. She had taken everything from me, our life, our trust, our marriage, and now I was going to take everything from her. The next part of my plan involved her workplace. Lucy worked at a small marketing firm, and her reputation there was important to her. She had always prided herself on being seen as professional, competent, and in control. I was about to blow that up, too. I sent an anonymous email to her boss, attaching the evidence of her affair with Nick. I didn't include anything that would implicate me directly, but I made sure it was enough to paint the picture: Lucy, the professional, using company time and resources to meet up with her affair partner. I didn't know how quickly her boss would act on the information, but I knew Lucy's reputation would never recover. She had spent years building her career, and now it was about to collapse around her. As the week went on, I watched her more closely than ever. She still had no idea what was coming, still living her life as though nothing had changed. But the moment of confrontation was drawing near. I could feel it. Then, on Thursday, everything began to unravel. It started with a phone call. I was in the living room when Lucy came rushing downstairs, her face pale, the phone clutched in her hand. She looked at me, eyes wide with panic. "I just got a call from my boss," she stammered. They found out about something. Something with my expenses. They think I've been misusing company funds." I played dumb. "What? That doesn't sound like you." I don't know how they found out, she said, pacing the room. They're saying I've been using company credit cards for personal things, but I haven't. I mean, I've used them for work trips, but nothing else. Her voice trembled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the texts, the lies, the betrayal. You'll sort it out, I said, my tone even. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. She nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. I hope so. They've put me on probation while they investigate. I could lose my job, Mark. What am I going to do? I shrugged, feigning sympathy. Just be honest with them. Maybe it'll blow over. But we both knew it wouldn't. This was just the beginning. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, I decided it was time to drop the next bomb. Lucy had been quiet all day, no doubt worrying about her job, and I could sense the cracks in her armor starting to show. I waited until we were halfway through the meal before speaking. I had an interesting conversation today, I said, my voice calm. Lucy looked up, her fork hovering over her plate. Oh. With who? I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. With a lawyer. Her face went pale. A lawyer? Why would you need to talk to a lawyer? I set down my fork and folded my hands on the table. Because I've been gathering evidence, Lucy. 4 weeks. I know about you and Nick. Her fork clattered to the table, and her eyes widened in shock. What? What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of evidence I had collected, texts, photos, GPS logs. I slid the phone across the table to her, watching as she stared at the screen, her face draining of color with each passing second. I know everything, I said, my voice cold and steady. I know about the weekends, the lies, the hotel rooms. You've been cheating on me for months. Lucy's hands trembled as she scrolled through the messages. Mark, Don't, I interrupted, my voice sharp. Don't even try to explain. I've seen enough. She slumped back in her chair, her face a mask of disbelief and fear. I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered. It just, Nick and I don't care, I snapped, cutting her off again. I don't care why you did it, Lucy. The fact is, you betrayed me. You lied to me, repeatedly. And now, you're going to pay for it. Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a brief moment, I saw the woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with. But that moment passed quickly, and all I could see was the liar who had torn that life apart. I'm filing for divorce, I said, my voice cold and detached. You won't get the house, you won't get any of our savings. You'll be left with nothing. Lucy's eyes widened in horror. No, Mark, please. Don't do this. I'll stop seeing him. I'll do anything. Please don't leave me. I shook my head. It's too late, Lucy. You made your choice. The reality of what was happening seemed to hit her all at once. The tears began to flow freely now, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed into her hands. Please, she begged. Please, Mark. Don't do this. I still love you. I stood up from the table, my decision final. You don't love me, Lucy. If you did, you wouldn't have done this. As I walked out of the room, leaving her sobbing at the table, I felt a strange sense of closure. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. But I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't angry. I was free. And soon, she would understand what it meant to lose everything. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and meetings with my lawyer. The divorce was in motion, and Lucy's pleas for forgiveness had quickly turned into cold silence. She barely spoke to me anymore, her presence in the house a mere shadow of what it had once been. Each morning, she woke up early, her eyes red and swollen, disappearing before I could say a word. She was trying to salvage her job, scrambling to hold on to the last thread of her career, but we both knew it was a losing battle. I, on the other hand, was methodical. Each day was one step closer to the finish line, freedom. I had even started packing up some of her things, leaving boxes in the spare room for when she would eventually leave. I didn't care where she went. I just wanted her gone. It was late one Friday evening, exactly 2 weeks after I had confronted her, when the real twist of fate occurred. I had been out grabbing a drink with Jake, the friend who had helped me gather the evidence. We toasted to what we both considered a well-executed plan. Everything was falling into place. Or so I thought. When I returned home, the house was dark, except for a faint light coming from the living room. Lucy never stayed up this late anymore. As I walked inside, I felt an odd tension in the air, like something was about to happen. I turned the corner into the living room, expecting to find her on the couch, maybe crying again, or drowning herself in some movie. But what I saw stopped me in my tracks. There she was, sitting in my favorite armchair, legs crossed, wearing a calm, almost serene expression on her face. She looked completely different. Not the broken, tearful woman I had left behind days ago, but someone composed, collected. In her hand was a folder, a familiar one. "Hey, Mark," she said, her voice disturbingly steady. "We need to talk." I blinked, my heart skipping a beat. "What are you doing?" She held up the folder, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "This is what you were planning, right? The evidence, the texts, everything you collected on me and Nick." I swallowed hard. "Yeah. I know what you did, Lucy. I'm filing for divorce." She smirked, flipping the folder open and pulling out a sheet of paper. "Oh, I know. And I'm not going to fight you on it. But here's the thing, Mark, it's not going to end the way you think it will." I stared at her, confused, but a growing sense of dread began to settle in my gut. "What are you talking about?" She sighed, leaning back in the chair, her fingers tapping lightly on the folder. "You've always been smart, Mark. Careful. Calculated. But you forgot one thing." My mind raced, trying to figure out what she was getting at. "Forgot what?" She stood up, slowly, crossing the room with the same calmness that unnerved me. "You forgot that I'm not the only one who can gather evidence. I've been doing a little digging of my own." She tossed the folder onto the table in front of me, and I stared at it, not daring to pick it up. "What is this?" "Open it." Reluctantly, I reached for the folder, flipping it open. The first thing I saw was a photo. A photo of me. But not just any photo, it was from last year's company retreat. I was sitting in the hotel lobby, talking to a woman I vaguely remembered. My hand rested on her knee. It was innocent, or at least that's how I had seen it at the time. We had been drinking, talking about work. Nothing happened. But the way the photo was taken, it looked bad. My chest tightened as I flipped to the next page. There were emails. Texts. Messages I had sent months ago, harmless at the time but now painted in a different light. Conversations with female coworkers, a few with an old friend from college. In some of them, I complained about my marriage, about Lucy. I had vented my frustrations, never thinking twice about how they might be interpreted. "You've been spying on me?" I asked, my voice cold. Lucy nodded, her smile widening. "You think I'm stupid? You think I didn't notice the way you started acting after you found out about Nick? I knew you were planning something, so I figured I'd protect myself." I stood there, speechless, staring down at the papers in front of me. It wasn't just one or two messages, there was enough here to paint me as the one having an emotional affair. I felt the walls closing in. "I didn't cheat," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It doesn't matter," Lucy replied. You know how divorce works. Perception is everything. With these emails and messages, I can easily argue that you were unfaithful, even if it wasn't physical. And with this, she gestured to the photo, well, let's just say it looks a lot worse than it was. My heart pounded in my chest. You won't win, I shot back. I've got proof of your affair. She nodded, unbothered. True. But here's where things get interesting, Mark. You see, I've spoken to my lawyer, and she advised me on a little something called no-fault divorce. We live in a no-fault state, remember? It doesn't matter if I cheated or if you did. It all comes down to how we divide things. And guess what? Your little plan to screw me over won't work. I felt the ground shift beneath me. What do you want? Her eyes sparkled with satisfaction as she spoke. Simple. I want the house. I want half of our savings. And I want you to let me walk away from this clean. No public shaming, no dragging this through the mud. I shook my head, the anger bubbling up inside me again. You don't get to walk away clean after what you did. Lucy's expression hardened. If you don't agree, I'll make sure those emails and photos get shared with everyone. Your family, your friends, your job. I'll tell them all how you emotionally cheated on me, how you were just as guilty as I was. I opened my mouth to argue, but the words wouldn't come. She had backed me into a corner, and I hadn't even seen it coming. Think about it, Mark, she said, her voice calm once more. You can fight me on this, drag it out, and in the end, you'll lose just as much as I will. Or, we can end this now. Quietly. You walk away with your dignity intact, and I get what I want. I stared at her, the woman I had once loved, now a stranger standing in front of me, holding all the cards. I had thought I was in control. I had thought I would be the one to walk away victorious. But now, I realized Lucy had been playing her own game all along. She was smarter than I had given her credit for. Smarter, and far more ruthless. Fine, I said through gritted teeth. You win. Lucy's smile returned, but it was cold. Good. I knew you'd see reason. She turned to leave, but before she did, she paused at the door, looking back at me one last time. Oh, and Mark. One more thing. Nick, he was never going to be a part of this. We ended things weeks ago. I just needed to give you something to find so you'd think you had the upper hand. And with that, she walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, stunned and defeated.